suitcase clicked shut with that small final sound, and I knew before he said a word that he was lying to me again. My husband always packed the night before a trip, folded everything into those gray packing cubes he'd ordered off Amazon, lined his dress shirts up by color, tucked his good watch into the felt pouch his mother had given him. That morning he'd done it all in the dark, while I pretended to sleep. And now he was zipping the bag in the gray January light that comes off Lake Ontario and makes everything look like an old photograph. "Flight's at 9, he said, not really to me. "Calgary's an hour behind, so I'll be in the office by lunch their time." "The Westbrook pitch," I said. "Right." He smoothed the front of his jacket. "Big one. 3 days, maybe 4 if they want a second round." I was sitting up against the headboard with my knees pulled to my chest. I'd been married to this man for 11 years, and I could have told you the exact temperature of his attention by the way he held his shoulders. That morning, his shoulders were turned away from me, angled toward the door, toward the hallway, toward whatever was waiting for him at the end of the 401. "You'll be okay with the kids," he said. It wasn't a question. It was the kind of thing you say to the person who feeds your cat while you're away. "We always are," I said. He paused at the doorway like he might say something else. Something with actual blood in it. And then he didn't. He just lifted the bag and went, and a minute later, I heard the soft chime of the alarm panel as he disarmed and rearmed the front door, and then the garage, and then the long electric sigh of his car pulling out into the snow. I went downstairs in my robe. Our daughter was at the kitchen island already, 9 years old and far too serious, drawing in the sketchbook she carried everywhere the way other kids carried a blanket. Our son was on the floor by the heat vent with his tablet, 7 and small for it, his coding app open, building one of his little games where a square jumped over other squares. "He didn't say bye," my son said, not looking up. "He had to catch a flight, bud. He said he'd come watch my robotics thing." My son's voice was flat in a way that I hated, a way no 7-year-old's voice should be. "On Thursday. At the library. I'm the one who programmed the arm." "I know, sweetheart. I'll be there." He said he would. My daughter spoke without lifting her pencil. "He says a lot of stuff before he leaves. It's like a coupon. You can't ever actually use it." I should have corrected her. A good mother corrects that. Instead, I stood there in my own kitchen, in the house in the beaches that we'd stretched ourselves to buy, with its bay window and its reclaimed brick, and the kind of light I used to photograph for my own clients. And I thought, she's right. He's a coupon that never scans. I made the Megs. I drove my daughter to school and my son to his, and I came home and I did not cry, because I had used up most of my crying about 8 months earlier. On a night I'll get to, and what was left in me after that wasn't sadness anymore. It was something quieter and a lot more useful. Here's the thing nobody tells you about marriages that go cold. They don't end with a bang. They end with logistics. We were 2 people running a small, well-funded organization with 2 stakeholders under the age of 10, and somewhere in the last few years the love had been replaced by a shared spreadsheet. He handled the mortgage and the investments. I handled the school and the dentist and the groceries and the meals and the birthdays and the small human grief of 2 children who knew, the way children always know, that their father preferred his phone to their faces. I run my own business. I'm an interior designer, the real kind, with a license and a portfolio and clients on the bridal path who'll spend more in a kitchen than most people spend on a wedding. I'm telling you this not to brag. I'm telling you because it matters later. Because the same brain that can walk into an empty room and see exactly how the light is going to move across it at 4 in the afternoon in October, that brain doesn't switch off when it walks into its own life. It just gets very, very quiet, and it watches. And what it had been watching for months was a series of small wrong notes. The hotel charges in cities he wasn't supposed to be in. The new cologne, sharper than the sandalwood he'd worn for a decade. The way his mother had stopped looking me in the eye at Christmas dinner. The way his 2 sisters, who used to be warm with me, who used to text me recipes and ask about the kids, had gone suddenly, carefully polite. The way the whole family had developed an inside joke I wasn't part of. A softness in their voices when they talked among themselves that closed like a door whenever I came into the room. I told myself it was stress, the pitch, the market, the mortgage renewal coming up at a rate that made him grind his teeth in his sleep. I'm a smart woman, and I lied to myself with real craftsmanship, the way only smart people can. The night that ended the lying was a Tuesday in May. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, logged in, while he showered. Not the work one, the personal one. And a message came in on the little chat bubble in the corner, from his older sister. And it said, "She's measuring ahead. Doctor's thrilled. Mom's already knitting. You should see her glow." I read it 3 times. Mom's knitting. Her glow. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I took out my phone and I photographed the screen. And then I scrolled fast, methodical. The way you'd flip through a contractor's invoice when you suspect he's padding the hours. And it was all there. Months of it. A woman. A pregnancy. My husband. My mother-in-law. My father-in-law. Both of his sisters. The entire family I had spent 11 years folding myself into. All of them gathered around this woman and this baby, like it was the second coming. Photos of a nursery, a group text thread I'd never been on, called, and I'm not making this up, the good news chat. His child, their grandchild, their niece or nephew. A whole future they were building 2 neighborhoods away, while I made his lunches. I closed the laptop. I put it back exactly where it had been, screen at the same angle, the way I'd reset a staged room before a photo shoot. He came down in his towel, kissed the top of my head, which he hadn't done in months, and said something about being hungry, and I made him a sandwich. I want you to understand that. I made the man a sandwich. Turkey on the multigrain he liked, the mustard he liked, cut on the diagonal. Because while he ate it, I was already 3 moves ahead, and the woman who is 3 moves ahead, and the woman who is 3 moves ahead, does not let you know she's playing. The next morning, after the kids were at school, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I'd done a kitchen for a woman in Rosedale 2 years before. A quiet, terrifying woman who'd run a hedge fund and then walked away from it, and over coffee she'd once told me, almost idly, that if anything ever happened in my marriage, there was exactly one person in this city I should call before I called anyone else. She'd written the name on the back of a tile sample. I'd kept it in my wallet for 2 years like a fire extinguisher. You hope you'll never need. The name was a family lawyer on the 11th floor of an office on University Avenue. I'll call her my lawyer because by the end of this, she'd become something closer than that. The first time I sat across from her, she let me talk for 10 minutes without writing anything down. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and she said, "Okay, first thing, stop being shocked. Shock is a luxury and you can't afford it yet. We'll be shocked together later, on my couch with wine. Right now, we work." I almost laughed. It was the first time in a year someone had treated me like a person with options instead of a wound. She asked me one question that changed everything. She asked me what I knew about our money. And here's where 11 years of being the one who wasn't good with the finances, which is what he'd always said, gently, like a compliment, turned out to be the trap it was always meant to be. Because I knew almost nothing. He handled it, the mortgage, the investments, the line of credit, the RRSPs, the kids' resps, the joint account that the household ran on. I had my own business account, thank God, separate. My own money. I'd kept my own. But the family money, the big money, the equity in the house we'd bought for a number that would make your eyes water now. All of that ran through him, and I'd let it because that was the deal, and because being trusting had felt like being loved. "Okay," my lawyer said, and she wrote one word on her pad. "Discovery. We need to know what exists before he knows we're looking." I hired the second professional that week, the investigator. I'd built an image of a private investigator out of bad television, the trench coat, the long lens in the parked car. The man I hired worked out of a sublet in Liberty Village and looked like an accountant, which is more or less what he was. He didn't promise me drama. He promised me documentation. "I don't catch people," he told me. "I catch records. People lie. Records don't." I gave him everything. The name I'd found on the laptop, the clinics and the messages, the dates of the business trips. It took him 11 days. He came to my house on a Thursday afternoon while the kids were at school, and he sat at my kitchen island and turned his laptop toward me, and he was gentle about it. I'll give him that. He said, "Are you sure?" before he played anything, and I said yes because I needed to see it, because a part of me, even then, even after the laptop, even after the sandwich, still wanted to be told I'd imagined all of it. I had not imagined it. There was a private birthing and postpartum retreat in the wine country down past Niagara, the kind of place that costs more per night than most people's mortgages, all wood and glass and women in white robes. The investigator had a photograph of my husband's car in the lot. He had the name on the booking, paid by wire transfer. And when he showed me the account the wire had come from, I had to put my hand flat on the counter to steady myself. Because it was our line of credit. The one secured against our house. He was financing his mistress's luxury delivery with the equity in the home where his actual children slept. And then there was the video. The investigator's associate had gotten footage from the lobby. I won't tell you exactly how, because I didn't ask. 30 seconds. My husband in a sweater I'd bought him, holding a door. His mother walking through it with an armful of flowers and a smile I hadn't seen on her face since my own children were born. His sisters behind her laughing, and in the corner, in a wheelchair the way they bring new mothers down, the woman, and a small wrapped bundle, and my husband leaning down to look at it, with a tenderness I had not gotten out of him in years. His whole family, there, together, for that. I watched it twice. The second time I didn't feel the floor drop out the way I had the first time. The second time something in me went smooth and cold and clear, like the surface of a lake at the moment the wind dies. And I understood that the part of my life that had belonged to that man was over. And that everything I did from here on out would be a kind of demolition. Careful demolition, the kind where you know which wall is load-bearing. "Send me the invoice," I told the investigator. "And the wire records, all of it, certified." That night I made the kids breakfast for dinner, pancakes with the chocolate chips they weren't usually allowed on a school night, and my son explained for 20 minutes how he'd gotten his robot's arm to stop overshooting. And my daughter showed me a drawing she'd done of the three of us on the porch, and I told them both they were the smartest, kindest people I had ever met. And I meant it more than I've ever meant anything. Then I put them to bed and I called my lawyer, and I said, "I have everything." And she said, "Then we move." I have to tell you about my lawyer, because if there's a hero in this story, besides my own 2 children, it's her. She was maybe 50, small, with reading glasses on a chain and the calmest voice I've ever heard. And underneath that calm was something I can only describe as strategic ferocity. She didn't hate my husband. She told me hating him was a waste of energy. She approached the whole thing the way a structural engineer approaches a building that needs to come down in a crowded neighborhood. Quietly, carefully, in the correct order, so that when it finally fell, it fell exactly where she meant it to and hurt no one she didn't intend to hurt. The first thing she did was protect the kids, on paper and in fact. She walked me through Ontario law in plain language, and I'm going to share some of it, because the version of me from a year before would have needed someone to explain it, and maybe you do too. Number 1, I could not, she told me firmly, just sell the house out from under him, no matter how much I wanted to, no matter that he'd borrowed against it to fund a delivery suite for another woman. In Ontario, the home you live in as a married couple is the matrimonial home, and neither spouse can sell it or remortgage it or even change the locks for keeps without the other's consent or a court order. People online love to say, "Just sell the house," she said dryly. They've never met the Family Law Act. What I could do, what we did, was apply for an order for exclusive possession so that he could not simply walk back in, and an order freezing the accounts so he couldn't move or hide another dollar, while we sorted out who actually owned what. Number 2, and this was the one that made her eyes go bright, the way a chess player's eyes go bright, that wire transfer, paid out of the marital line of credit, was what she called dissipation. He had taken money that belonged to both of us, and spent it for his own purposes, against the interests of the marriage. When it came time to calculate the equalization, the Ontario way of splitting the growth of what each of you owns, that wasn't going to be quietly forgotten. It was going to be added right back to his side of the ledger, dollar for dollar, as if he still had it, plus the delivery, plus the retreat, plus every charge the investigator could tie to that other life. He spent it to make himself feel generous, she said. We're going to make him pay it twice. I won't pretend the next part was clean or fast. Divorces in this country are not fast. But we were ready, and he was not, and that difference is everything. I told the children first, because they deserved to hear it from me before they heard it in some weaponized form from anyone else. I sat them down 9 and 7 on the good couch, the one I'd reupholstered myself, and I told them the truth in the size they could hold, that their father and I weren't going to be married anymore, that it wasn't their fault, that it was never going to be their fault, that I loved them past the edge of the world, that things were going to change, that we might move. My son asked if he could bring his robot. My daughter asked if she could bring her art. You bring everything that matters, I said. We take the parts of us. We leave the rest. My daughter looked at me for a long moment with those serious eyes, and then she got up and came and put her arms around my neck, and into my shoulder she said, "We're staying with you." Not a question, a decision. And my son climbed up on the other side and said, "Obviously," in the way that only a 7-year-old can make sound like a constitutional amendment, and I held both of them and let myself shake for about 10 seconds, and then I stopped, because there was work to do. We moved the children's schools first, quietly, before anything went public, so that whatever storm came they'd be in calm classrooms, where no one knew. I transferred my business banking, opened new accounts in my own name, made sure the engine of my own income couldn't be touched. My lawyer and I documented every asset the investigator and I could find. And there was more than I'd known, because of course there was. The man who handled the money had handled it the way a man handles money he plans to keep. When the papers were served, he found out the way you find out a wave has already passed over you all at once, and from underneath. He called me 40 times that first night. I let my lawyer's office handle it. He came to the house and found the locks changed. Temporarily, legally, with an order. My lawyer had been very careful. And he stood on the porch of the home he borrowed against to fund another family, and he rang the bell, and I watched him through the window I'd designed, and I did not open the door. Not out of cruelty. Out of finality. There is a difference, and he had taught it to me himself. His family circled the wagons, of course. His mother called me. The same woman who'd been knitting for the other baby. And her voice was honey and acid in equal measure. She told me I was being vindictive. She told me I was being vindictive. She told me to think of the children, she who had stood in a birthing retreat with an armful of flowers, while my children waited at home for a father who'd promised to come to a library robotics demo. I let her finish. Then I said, very quietly, "You should talk to your lawyer." And I hung up, because as it happened, she was going to need one. That was the other thing my lawyer found. The grandparents hadn't just been passive. They'd helped move money. There'd been a gift to my husband around the time of the wire. That wasn't really a gift. It was a shuffle. An attempt to make our marital pot look smaller before anyone went looking. My lawyer's eyes did the bright thing again. "They want to be characters in this story," she said. "We'll write them apart." The day I remember most clearly wasn't the day of the final order. It was a gray afternoon at a long table in my lawyer's boardroom, a court reporter in the corner with her little machine. My husband across from me looking like a man who'd been kept awake by something he couldn't name. His lawyer beside him with notes spread out in a panic. I wore navy. My hair was pulled back. I felt, for the first time in a year, like the most prepared person in the room. Because I was. My husband's lawyer tried to open soft, talked about being reasonable, about keeping things amicable for the children. My lawyer let him finish. Then she opened her single closed folder. She always kept it closed until the exact moment she wanted it open. A small theatrical thing I came to love. And she laid out, in that calm, flat voice, the line of credit, the wire transfer, the retreat, the certified records, The dates, the dissipation, the grandparents' little shuffle, the whole architecture of it, brick by brick. And she did it without ever once raising her voice or saying a cruel word, which made it so much worse for them than shouting ever could have. My husband stared at the table. At one point, he looked up at me. Actually looked at me. For the first time, and I couldn't tell you how long. And there was something in his face that wanted to be apology and didn't quite have the spine for it. I held his gaze. I didn't soften. I'd done enough softening to last a lifetime. We didn't go to trial. People rarely do, once they understand exactly how the trial will go. He took the deal because the alternative was worse, and the deal was this. I kept the equity I was owed, and then some, with the dissipated money added back to his column, the way my lawyer had promised. He bought out my share of the matrimonial home so I could leave it behind clean rather than fight to keep a house full of ghosts. I got primary care of the children, with a parenting schedule that gave him the access a court will always give a parent, and that he would, I knew even then, mostly fail to use. He paid support, child and spousal both, at a number calculated on every dollar he actually earned, not the smaller number he'd hoped to hide behind. The grandparents settled their piece quietly, rather than have the shuffle examined in open court, and the settlement was not small. And here's the part the people who watch stories like this always want, so I'll give it to you straight. It caught up with him in every direction at once. The firm where he was, on partnership track, found out. These things always travel in a city that's smaller than it pretends to be. And while they didn't fire him, because the legal exposure of that is its own problem, the track quietly evaporated. He was moved sideways into a corner with a smaller window. His bonuses, what survived the support order, came to almost nothing. His parents, whose whole identity ran on appearances, sold their place and downsized to a condo and told everyone it was to be closer to the new grandchild. And everyone nodded and knew. The woman, I heard later, because you always hear later, did not stay long once the money she'd been promised turned out to be money that no longer existed. I didn't celebrate any of it. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel triumphant, and what I felt instead was something cleaner and quieter. The feeling you get when you finally finish demolishing a rotten structure, and the lot is just empty and level and yours, ready for whatever you decide to build. What I built was small, and it was perfect. I bought a narrow brick house in the East End, nothing grand. The kind of place that needed someone who could see what it might become. I gutted it myself, more or less. Designed every inch. Did half the work with my own hands on the weekends. Green cabinets in the kitchen because I'd always wanted green cabinets, and the man who handled the money had always called them a resale risk. A reading nook in the dormer for my daughter. A whole wall of pegboard and bins in the basement for my son's robots. A porch with a swing. The day we moved in, the swing was already hung. The kids tumbled out of the car into a snowless April afternoon, and my son went straight for the swing and tested the chains, frowning, the way he tested everything, and then nodded once, satisfied, and said, "Structurally sound," and my daughter walked through the front rooms slowly, touching the walls, and finally said, "This one's warmer than the houses you make for other people, Mom." And it was. Because it wasn't for anyone else, it was just ours. We ended up on the porch swing as the light went gold over the rooftops, the three of us fitting together exactly, the chains creaking in a rhythm I could have listened to forever. My daughter mentioned, out of nowhere, in that calm, matter-of-fact way she had, that he'd called her school, that he'd phoned the office instead of phoning her. And then she let it go, because she was already someone who knew the difference between a father and a man who used to live in the house. And she decided, with a clarity that broke and mended my heart in the same beat, not to spend her one childhood waiting on a coupon that would never scan. I put them to bed that night in rooms I'd built for them, and then I stood at my own window looking out over the dark shape of the city, the lake somewhere beyond it, and I thought about the long winter I'd just come through. I'd been a woman who wasn't good with the finances. I'd been a wife who made the sandwich. And then one Tuesday in May, I'd stopped being shocked, the way my lawyer told me to, and I'd gotten very quiet and very clear, and I'd taken everything that had been done to me, and I'd turned it, piece by careful piece, into a foundation. He had tried to build a new life over the buried bones of ours. He'd find out what I already knew, that you can't build anything that lasts on a lie, and that the woman he'd taught to expect nothing had turned out to be the most dangerous kind of person. The kind who finally stops expecting and starts deciding. The old life was finished, its papers filed, its locks changed, its accounts settled. And the new one, mine, theirs, ours, was just getting started. Built board by board and nail by nail, by my own 2 hands, on ground that no one could ever take out from under us again. For a long time I believed that being trusting was the same thing as being good. I let my husband handle the money because handing it over felt like love, and I told myself a beautiful lie so well that I almost missed the rot underneath my own perfect floors. That was my mistake, and I won't pretend it wasn't. But here is what I learned in the worst year of my life. Sitting at my own kitchen island while a quiet man in a sublet showed me the truth on his laptop. Nothing in this story happened by accident. Every ending was earned by something someone did first. My husband borrowed against the home where his children slept to pay for another woman's delivery suite. And that choice, not my anger, not my lawyer, not the court, is what wrote his ruin. His parents chose to stand in a birthing retreat with armfuls of flowers, while a 7-year-old waited at a library for a father who never came. And their downsized condo and their hollow excuses were the harvest of that exact afternoon. Cause and effect. You reap the field you actually plant, not the one you meant to. I used to think strength meant holding a marriage together no matter what it cost me. I don't think that anymore. The hardest, most useful thing I ever did was stop being shocked the way my lawyer told me to, and get quiet and get clear and act in the right order. That clarity wasn't coldness. It was a kind of integrity, the refusal to let someone steal not just my money, but my own good sense, my own clean conscience. I never lied. I never hid the children from a parent who had a right to them. I built my case on records, on what was provably true, because the truth was the only thing in that house that had never once betrayed me. And I want my daughter and my son to take this from it, more than any settlement. Be honest even when it costs you, because a clear conscience is the only floor that never rots. Be smart. Learn how your own life actually works, where money is, what the law really says, so that no one can ever again make you small by making you ignorant. And be steady. Steadiness isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to do the next right thing while your hands are still shaking, the way mine shook for exactly 10 seconds before I stopped and got to work. My daughter decided at 9 not to spend her one childhood waiting on a coupon that would never scan. My son tested the swing chains and pronounced them sound. They are going to be people of substance, kind, clear-eyed, and unbreakable, because they watched their mother turn the worst thing that ever happened to her into a foundation, board by board, on ground no one can take out from under us again.